So welcome again to this retreat. In your heart are paths of hope. And this is the second day of this retreat. So it's a joy to be able to journey together in the path of this retreat, these 9 days towards the Feast of the Annunciation. It was a joy to see everybody last night in the sharing that we had and to hear the experiences of yesterday's retreat. So let's begin with a song, and it's a song called In the Heart of Winter. And I just invite us as we sing this song, as we just continue that slowing down, we just ask God to bring us into God's presence, to help us to be aware of the way that God is reaching out to us in this day, or simply just to ask for that grace that you need in this day. So we can just take a few moments of silence, and then we can begin with this song. In the heart of winter, I am there. In the hope of new life, I am there. In the joy of long days and the falling of what's been, I am there. In the heart of winter, I am there. In the hope of new life, I am there. In the joy of long days and the falling of what's been, I am there. Be still, my child, be still, my friend, be still, my child, be still and know. In the heart of winter, I am there. In the hope of new life, I am there. In the joy of long days and the falling of what's been, I am there. So Holy Spirit, once again we ask you for this day of retreat. I ask that you can help us to really listen, to perceive those ways that you are leading us, holding us, healing, empowering us. Just pray for each one of us that are connecting to this retreat in these days. Amen. So yesterday was this great feast day of St. Patrick, and we heard the breastplate of St. Patrick, or the lorica as it's known. And it's this beautiful ancient prayer, this ancient song. And I just really find that prayer kind of a continuation. So if you want to pray with that prayer again today, I invite you to do so. But what I just wanted to mention this morning is really that beginning of that prayer that calls out to God, the Trinity. And then it goes through all these different moments of life, the arising, the waking, the strength of heaven, the sun, the sea, calling on the angels, the cherubims, all those dangers, those difficulties that day might bring. And yet it begins and it ends with this invocation to the Trinity. And I think as maybe we started to slow down yesterday, hopefully, to open our senses, to see, to hear, to smell, to touch, to maybe trace that Celtic knot, that kind of pilgrimage, the pilgrimage of the eye, that's slowing down, becoming aware of all that we're holding within us, all that we've lived. And that prayer kind of weaves through it, the beginning and the ending. We're able to rise, we're able to live, we're able to move into each day with the beginning and the ending that is held in the Trinity, that's held in God. John O'Donoghue says it in a very beautiful way. He says, talking about this prayer, he says, the new day is understood as a gift of the divine. The very energy of awakening and arising is made possible by the love and care of God. Whatever the day holds is welcome because of the ultimate origin and destination of the day is divinity. It explicitly recognizes the day in the light of the Trinitarian embrace. A day is no mere segment of anonymous and contingent time. And I think, I don't know, maybe we can feel like we've lost so much in this year. There is no anonymous time. That's what I really loved from that quote from John O'Donoghue. If we want to continue, say, praying with this prayer of St. Patrick, to really allow ourselves to rest in that origin and the destination. God who is in all. I think I had shared with you yesterday as well how I was drawing these Celtic knots when I was doing my pilgrimage around Daly City, this replicated pilgrimage of Glendalough. And at the same time I was drawing this cross from Glendalough, and I was trying to draw the knots, and it was just I was getting so frustrated because it was too difficult. And as I was walking, it was kind of like those pathways were the pathways that I was living in that moment, pathways of my life, pathways of the present, that physical pathway of going round in that same route each day, seeing the same things, seeing new things. It was that path, that pilgrimage. And as I was holding kind of that anger, that frustration of not being able, it's too difficult. Like the first glance is very beautiful. These knots are so beautiful, and they are. And then you kind of like, this feels long, this feels heavy. When are they ever going to end? And I think in that moment I realised that I was touching something deeper inside of me. Those paths that do feel heavy, those paths that do feel long, that's those paths that are perhaps not so beautiful. These paths that feel like this kind of anonymous time. And yet as I was walking in that pilgrimage, just realising that all is held in God. It was like those paths where could sink in deeper to a place of rest. God who is my origin, God who is in all, God who is that destination. Being able to simply just to rest. I think on that pilgrimage as well, as I was going around and being met by the flowers, being met by this snail that met me on the road, being met by these birds that were flying overhead. And this was in the city. Just realising that everything, all of creation, is a way of being able to connect with the heart of the Creator. Even that snail that met me on the road, that told me to slow down. So maybe if you're able to today, if you're able to go out for a walk, or just even in your house, how is it that you're able to connect with your Creator? There's something about going back to our origins that we need. When those paths feel, say, like difficult, when it feels a failure, when things feel a dead end, when things feel just too heavy, to be able to rest in that place from where we came from. And that can be on different levels. I'm thinking of even going back, even if it's just in my memory or my kind of internal senses, going back to the landscape in England, walking along the South Downs, the pass, the country roads. There's something there that holds me. There's something there that is part of me, that I feel a bit more kind of able. I feel like I'm known again in one sense. I feel I'm able to continue that path, or being back home with my family in Ireland, sat around the dinner table. There's something about that experience of origin that gives me strength and gives me love to be able to continue walking and seeing. There's something about connecting to our origins. Or I think about, and I've shared this a number of times, I think, for those that have come on retreats or prayer groups with us, I still do when I go back home, but I love lying on my dad's chest and hearing his heartbeat. And we'll be lying on the sofa there, and he'll be watching TV and just listening to my dad's heartbeat and seeing, that this heart, in one sense, is beating for me. And in those moments as well, when I think, I'm things are a little bit difficult, I imagine, I remember my mum, my dad holding me, that first moment when I was born, and just that delight of seeing me, that delight of holding me, that delight of this new life that has been gifted to them. And I think to remember that smile of love, that gaze of love, that embrace of delight, as well just gives me that sense of strength, that sense of I belong, and as well that strength, I say, that continue walking those paths. That coming back to our origins. And of course, in that most profound way, in that deeper way, that deepest way, to come to God's heart. There's one of my favorite readings in the Bible is from the Book of Wisdom, and it says, talking to God, like, for you, God, you love all things that are, and loathe nothing that you have made. For what you hated, you would not have fashioned. And how could a thing remain unless you willed it or be preserved, had it not been called forth by you? But you spare all things, because they are yours, O Lord and lover of souls. God is our creator. God is our origin. But God didn't make us because God had to. It's like, and God doesn't care for us because God's like, well, I made you, I have to care for you now. The beginning of our life, the origin, the deepest origin of our life, is a God who delighted in creating us, who delighted in our being, who delighted in bringing us into life. At the beginning of our life, our origin is love. And so today's invitation is simply to rest in God's love, but really in that particular way of coming back to our origin, to realize and to experience that my life, at the beginning of my life, is a God who delighted in me, who delights in me, and who created me out of love, and who wants to walk with me in all these paths of life, who has come into a covenant with us. And as we've been, started yesterday, this kind of this remembering, of this year. One of the memories that was coming to me in this day was remembering how of Easter. In April time, we're almost 1 year away from celebrating Easter again, and we were all at homes. We were all in our homes celebrating Easter. I don't know if you remember, I can't remember exactly what day it was, but that image of Pope Francis all by himself looking out over St. Peter's Square. It was a rainy night, and just that image of that aloneness and that kind of that fixed gaze out into the square, but that fixed gaze out into the world. And I was remembering those Easter celebrations I was like, am I really going to be able to enter into Easter in this way? I love the Easter celebration so much, with all the bells and the candles and the songs and the baptism. Like, it just, such a joyful experience. But one of the main experiences that stood out for me as we were gathered together in our community watching the Holy Thursday Mass. And I was completely taken by surprise, because, to be honest, I didn't think that I was going to be able to really enter into that experience of the Triduum. And as I listened to that reading, that first reading from the Holy Thursday service, it's the story of the Passover. And I just want to read one segment out of it. So God is saying to the Hebrews, "This is how you are to eat the Passover, with your loins girt, sandals on your feet, and your staff in hand. And you shall eat like those who are in flight. It is the Passover of the Lord." And that image of, you have to eat quickly. It's not about sitting down. Why? Because there's hope. Because there's a path that I'm making that you're able to cross that sea. There is a path that I'm making that you're able to cross over and come into a land that is free, a land where there's plenty, where you're able to be settled, where you're able to grow and to flourish. Eat quickly. And I think that experience of hope on last Holy Thursday is something that has carried me throughout this whole year. God, in that moment, God who is the origins of those Hebrew people, who's our origin, saying, eat quickly, there's hope, there's a new path opening up. And I think, as I say, that can be very difficult to see or to believe. Like, how can we see these new paths opening up? But I think the Hebrew people were also able to connect with their origin. It was God who had called them. It was God who had chosen them. They knew their story. Their deepest belonging was in the God of Abraham. And so, as I say, just this invitation for today is simply to come into this rest. This rest of the one, as I say, who has created us. Jesus, who needed to go off into the mountains to pray, to be alone, to be with his Father, to be with his source as well. And I remember one prayer of mine that was kind of a little bit this imagery of Jesus going off into the mountains. And I was on our month retreat that we have each year. This was about 4 or 5 years ago now, and on this retreat, I can't remember exactly, but I just remember after the preaching had happened. I don't remember the content of the preaching, to be honest, but I know that I was immediately brought into prayer. And in that experience of prayer, Jesus was kind of in that, my imagination, the imaginative prayer, as kind of like as a teenager. And he was like, come on, Sarah, I want you to see someone. And so in my prayer, in this imaginative prayer, I went with Jesus, and we went up the mountain. And as I went up the mountain, we come across a shepherd. And this shepherd was this kind of wisdom figure, kind of like a Native American kind of figure, a wisdom figure. But this elderly man was there on this mountain and just came and looked at Jesus's eyes and embraced Jesus. And I could just, feel that kind of deep connection there. And then this elderly gentleman, shepherd, wisdom figure turned to me and was saying, "Tell me, what's going on at the bottom of the mountain?" And I just started to tell this person, this God, this father figure, this wisdom figure, what it was that I was experiencing. And I felt myself in that moment that as I was speaking these very particular situations, the experience of somebody that was dying, the experience of a difficulty in a relationship that I was having, the experience of the the refugees, as I just started to tell all of these things that was happening at the bottom of the mountain, I just simply found myself heard. And not just myself heard, but all of these situations heard and embraced and listened to. And found myself loved and looked at and gazed upon in the same way that Jesus was looked and gazed upon and embraced. For me, that prayer experience is something that I hold very dear and very tender. Jesus who was bringing me in that prayer, in that imaginative prayer, to the Father, to that Father figure, to that wisdom figure, to the Creator figure, to God. And allowing myself to be loved, to know that this is my source, my beginnings. This is that delight, the delight of the one who created me. And so I invite you as well, maybe if that image helps, to go with Jesus, maybe up the mountain. Yesterday we went up the mountain with Patrick. But to go up the mountain with Jesus, and to sit with Jesus and ask Jesus to show us or to bring us into the experience of the one who is our beginning, our deepest origins. So I think sometimes as well we can often forget this. We can forget who it is who first delighted in us. We can forget who it is who created us out of love. We can forget that actually our deepest identity is daughter, is son, is child of God. And I think today, as we hear in the beginning of Lent, come back to me with all your heart. Come back to me with all your heart and realize once again that I call you daughter, that I call you son, that you are my most beautiful, my most beloved child. And there's I know that I always say like one of my favourite readings, but another one of my favourite readings in the Bible is this healing of this woman that is bleeding. And she's been bleeding for 12 years. And she's tried to cure herself, going to many, many doctors in different places, and she's no better. She's actually worse from it. And I think this story for me, yes, it's a story of healing. I think it's a healing in many different levels as well. Jesus in this story, after the woman has reached out and touched his cloak, and she risked everything to do that, Jesus turns around. Jesus comes and recognizes her, is looking for her. And he says to her, when he says, who touched me, and she starts telling him the whole truth, she says to her, daughter, your faith has saved you. And as I pray this gospel, I prayed it, just for me, those words always stand out. Maybe this was the first time that this woman had heard her deepest identity being called. Maybe it was the first time she really heard herself being called daughter. What did that provoke in her? Somebody who knew her fully, calling her daughter. You belong. You are part of this promise. You are held in this great love of God the Father, of God the Mother, of God the Creator. So I think, as we rest today, as I say, is about resting. And maybe we're still doing many things on the outside. We're probably still working, or maybe studying, or I don't know. But let's try and take that journey into that beginnings of our life. And maybe that can be on the, of family as well. Just remembering those places where we feel hope and we feel strength, where we feel at home, where we feel that we belong. I've actually put this this image up here as well, because this is the chapel, a painting of the chapel in our retreat center in Spain, in Siete Aguas. And it's really like the heart of the Verbum Dei community. This is where all the older missionaries who are in that retreat center, they all go there every single day to pray. And I think for me, that's another one of my origins. That when I kind of, either I'm physically in that chapel, or I bring myself in my memory into that space. And it's got a very low roof. It used to be the stables, and they made it into this chapel. So what you actually see at the end there is the tabernacle placed into the literally the manger, where the straw was for the horses. When I bring myself into that memory as well, it's another place of, this is my origin. This is where I can also find that strength and that hope. And it's that invitation to go and to rest in that place in God's heart. God's heart, who has beat for eternity for each one of us. Whose heart beats in delight. And so I just really pray for each one of us in this day that we can find that gaze of our Creator over our life.